John Miller, a seasoned forest ranger with 15 years of experience, lived alone in a modest cabin at the edge of Carlton Forest. Over the years, he had grown attuned to the rhythms of nature and adhered to one unbreakable rule. Mother bears were the most dangerous creatures in the wild, especially in spring when they emerged from hibernation, fiercely protective of their cubs. Fresh tracks near the stream just the day before had been a stark reminder of this. That morning, like any other, John put on his worn ranger jacket, checked his gear, and stepped into the crisp mountain air. The scent of pine needles filled his lungs as he began his regular patrol, following familiar trails. Through his binoculars, he scanned the valley below, taking in the beauty of the forest awakening from its winter slumber. His radio occasionally crackled with routine updates, but he remained vigilant, knowing the forest was unpredictable. Throughout his career, John had carefully avoided direct confrontations with bears, documenting their movements, warning campers, and maintaining a safe distance. But on this morning, an unusual cry pierced the wilderness, an unfamiliar and haunting sound. It grabbed his attention and forced him to make a decision. He could walk away, or he could step into what might be the most dangerous moment of his career, a moment that could forever change his life. The spring thaw had created patches of mud throughout the forest floor. These muddy areas often attracted animals, but they could also be treacherous. He had already rescued 2 deer from deep mud this season, but deer were one thing. Bears were entirely different. Last week, his supervisor had warned about increased bear activity near the eastern ridge. 3 different mother bears had been spotted with their cubs, more than usual for this area. The rangers had closed several hiking trails as a precaution. Nature was unpredictable, but mother bears were a known danger. Their behavior was one of the few constants in the ever-changing forest. As John continued his morning patrol, the weight of his rescue gear pressed against his back. Standard equipment for a forest ranger, though he had never used it for a bear emergency. The very thought of getting close enough to need it made him uncomfortable. But sometimes nature forces our hand, challenging our deepest fears and most firmly held beliefs. And on this morning, as the sun climbed higher in the sky, John was about to face such a moment. The first hint of trouble came as a faint whimper carried on the morning breeze. John stopped in his tracks, his experienced ears trying to locate the source. The sound grew clearer, a mix between a cry and a desperate moan. It echoed from somewhere near the eastern marsh area, where the spring rains had created treacherous mud pools. His heart quickened as he recognized the distinct sound of a bear cub in distress. The cry held that unmistakable pitch that young bears made when separated from their mothers. Against his better judgment, John moved cautiously toward the sound. The marsh area spread out before him, a patchwork of muddy pools and early spring vegetation. The cries grew more desperate with each step. Crouching behind a fallen log, John finally spotted the source. His breath caught in his throat. About 50 feet ahead, a small black bear cub was trapped in deep mud. The more it struggled, the deeper it seemed to sink. Its dark fur was caked with thick gray muck, and its movements were becoming increasingly feeble. John's trained eye assessed the situation. The cub had likely been caught for hours. Its usually glossy black fur was matted and dull, its eyes showing signs of exhaustion. Each attempted movement only seemed to pull it deeper into the treacherous mud. The cub's front paws clawed helplessly at the surface, finding no solid ground to grip. Scanning the surrounding area, John's stomach tightened. Fresh bear tracks circled the mud pool. Large, distinctive prints that could only belong to the mother. She had clearly tried to reach her cub, but had been forced back by the unstable ground. The tracks told a story of frustrated attempts, of a mother's desperate efforts to save her baby. Time was running out. The cub's movements were becoming weaker, its cries softer. The spring sun was climbing higher, and the temperature was rising. Dehydration would soon become a serious concern. John estimated the cub had been trapped since early morning, or even overnight. Its chances of survival were diminishing with each passing minute. More worrying were the signs of the mother's recent presence. Broken branches and disturbed vegetation showed she had circled the area repeatedly. The patterns suggested she had left to feed, which meant she could return at any moment. The thought made John's skin prickle. A desperate mother bear was the most dangerous force in these woods. The cub made another attempt to free itself, its movements now alarmingly weak. The mud had reached its chest, creating a powerful suction that held it firmly in place. Its small head rested on the surface, exhaustion evident in its half-closed eyes. The sight pulled at John's heart. Without intervention, the cub would not survive much longer. Steam rose from the mud in the warming air, creating an eerie mist around the trapped cub. The scene before him challenged everything John knew about wildlife management. Rangers were trained to let nature take its course, to not interfere with the natural order. But there was nothing natural about this mud trap, likely created by human activity in the area. The cub's cries grew fainter, barely audible now. Its small body trembled with exhaustion, each breath seeming to require tremendous effort. The mud continued its relentless pull, threatening to claim another victim of the unforgiving wilderness. Time was slipping away, and with it, the cub's chance of survival. John knew he had to make a decision. The mother could return at any moment. The mud was deep and dangerous. Everything he had learned in his 15 years as a ranger screamed at him to stay back. But as he watched the cub's weakening struggles, he realized some moments demand we challenge our fears, break our rules, and risk everything to do what feels right. John took a deep breath and made his decision. The sight of the weakening cub outweighed every safety protocol he had learned. Keeping his movements slow and deliberate, he removed his heavy ranger jacket and equipment belt. The less weight he carried into the mud, the better his chances of reaching the cub without getting stuck himself. Testing the ground with a long branch, John began mapping a path toward the trapped cub. The mud surface was deceptive. Areas that looked solid would suddenly give way to deep pools. He tied a rope from his rescue gear to a sturdy tree, creating a lifeline. If things went wrong, at least he would have a way to pull himself out. The mud grabbed at his boots with each careful step. Sweat trickled down his back despite the cool morning air. The cub watched his approach with tired eyes, too exhausted to show fear. John could see its small chest heaving with labored breaths. The mud had risen higher, now reaching the cub's shoulders. There was no more time for hesitation. 20 feet from the cub, John's right leg sank unexpectedly. The cold mud rushed past his knee, then his thigh. Using the branch for support, he managed to spread his weight and stop sinking. His heart pounded against his ribs. One wrong move here could trap them both. The mud's powerful suction made each movement a battle. 15 feet remained between him and the cub. The young bear's eyes widened as John drew closer. Despite its exhaustion, it began to struggle again, creating dangerous waves in the mud that threatened John's already precarious balance. He spoke in low, soothing tones, trying to calm both the frightened animal and his own racing heart. The next steps were agonizingly slow. John had to test each foot placement, shifting his weight gradually. The branch helped distribute his weight, but the mud seemed to fight against every movement. 10 feet from the cub, he felt the ground change beneath him. The mud became deeper, more fluid. This was the dangerous zone where one wrong step could prove fatal. The cub's fear grew with John's proximity. Its weak struggles stirred up the mud, making visibility difficult. Despite its depleted strength, the cub managed a few feeble growls. The sound reminded John that he was dealing with a wild animal, regardless of how young or tired it might be. One bite or swipe from those small but sharp claws could still cause serious damage. 7 feet separated them now. John's legs trembled from the effort of moving through the dense mud. Each step required careful planning and enormous physical effort. The mud pulled at him constantly, threatening to throw him off balance. The rope around his waist was reassuring, but he knew a fall here could still be disastrous. The cub's movements became more frantic as John closed the final distance. Its fear gave it a last surge of energy, and it thrashed in the mud, spraying the thick muck into the air. John had to pause, letting the animal tire itself out. He couldn't risk approaching while it was panicking. Those precious minutes of waiting felt like hours as he watched the cub deplete its remaining strength. Finally, just 5 feet away, John began the riskiest part of his rescue attempt. He would need to get close enough to secure a loop of rope around the cub without getting pulled under himself. The mud here was treacherous, more liquid than solid. His boots found no firm footing, and each movement threatened to throw him off balance. The young bear's eyes locked with his,
filled with a mixture of fear and exhaustion. John worked to prepare the rescue loop while maintaining his precarious position. His arms shook from the strain of holding the branch that kept him from sinking deeper. The cub's occasional weak growls reminded him of the danger he faced from both the mud and the terrified animal. 3 feet now separated man and bear. John could see the cub's dark fur matted with mud, its small ears flattened against its head in fear. The mud surface rippled with each of their movements, a dangerous dance that could end in disaster for both of them. The morning sun beat down on them, adding to the intensity of the moment. Just as John prepared to make his final approach, a sound froze him in place. A sound that made his blood run cold and his hands shake on the support branch. From somewhere in the forest behind him came a sound he had dreaded since starting this rescue. The deep, unmistakable growl of an adult bear. The mother had returned. The growl grew louder, sending vibrations through the morning air. John's position could not have been worse. Trapped waist-deep in mud, his back exposed, with no way to reach his bear spray or other safety equipment. The branch that had helped him keep his balance now felt useless against the approaching danger. He heard her before he saw her. The heavy footfalls and cracking branches announced the arrival of the mother bear. John fought every instinct that screamed at him to run. Running was impossible in the mud, and even if he could, fleeing would only trigger the bear's chase response. With painful slowness, he turned his head to look. The mother bear emerged from the tree line, her massive form making John's breath catch in his throat. She stood nearly 7 feet tall on her hind legs, her dark fur bristling with aggression. Her muscles rippled beneath her thick coat as she dropped to all fours, her eyes fixed on the scene before her. The morning sun caught her powerful form, highlighting fresh scars on her face from previous battles. The distance between them was less than 30 feet. The mother bear's nostrils flared as she tested the air, processing the scenario that awaited her. Her cub weakly cried out at the sight of her, the sound barely carrying over the quiet morning air. John remained absolutely still, his heart thundering so loudly he was sure the bear could hear it. Her first steps toward them were measured, cautious. The mother bear's eyes never left John, analyzing him with an intelligence that many mistook for simple animal instinct. Each of her paw prints left deep impressions in the solid ground. Her head swayed from side to side, a clear sign of agitation. Every ranger knew what came next would determine life or death. 20 feet now separated them. John could see her powerful jaw, the teeth that could crush bones with a single bite. Her claws, long and sharp, dug into the earth with each step. The morning breeze carried her wild scent, a powerful reminder that he faced one of nature's most formidable predators. In his vulnerable position, stuck in the mud, he had no chance of survival if she charged. The mother bear's growl deepened, rumbling through the clearing like distant thunder. Her eyes, dark and fierce, held generations of protective instinct. John knew she saw only a threat to her cub, a predator that needed to be eliminated. His good intentions meant nothing to her primal drive to protect her young. 15 feet. The bear's approach stirred the morning mist that still clung to the ground. Her movements were becoming more aggressive, her head lowered in the telltale sign of an impending charge. The mud around John seemed to grip him tighter, as if nature itself conspired to hold him in place for judgment. The cub whimpered again, drawing both John's and the mother's attention. In that brief moment, John saw something flicker in the mother bear's eyes. Recognition of her cub's desperate situation, perhaps, or acknowledgement of the mud trap that had nearly claimed her own massive form in earlier rescue attempts. 10 feet separated them now, close enough for John to see the steam of her breath in the cool morning air. Close enough to count the scars that marked her powerful shoulders. Close enough to see the decision forming in her dark eyes. John remained still, accepting whatever fate awaited him. He had chosen to help her cub, and now he would face the consequences of that choice. The mother bear rose again to her full height, casting a shadow over John's trapped form. Her growl vibrated through his chest, a sound that spoke of raw power and absolute authority. In this moment, she would decide his fate. All his years of training, all his experience in the wilderness meant nothing now. He was at the mercy of this magnificent and terrifying creature. Time seemed to stop as they faced each other. John's world narrowed to the space between them, to the mud that held him fast, to the weakening cub that had brought them to this moment. The mother bear's eyes held his, and in them, he saw something that defied everything he knew about these powerful predators. The rage was still there, the protective instinct that had driven her to this confrontation. But beneath it, John saw something else, something that would forever change his understanding of these creatures. As the mother bear lowered herself back to all fours, her next actions would challenge everything John thought he knew about wild animals. His fate balanced on a knife's edge. The mother bear took another step forward, her powerful form now close enough that John could feel the heat radiating from her body. What happened next would become a story that few would believe, a moment that would challenge the fundamental understanding of wild animal behavior. The mother bear's next move defied every natural law of the wilderness. Instead of attacking, she lowered her head and let out a soft sound, unlike anything John had ever heard in his years as a ranger. It wasn't a growl of aggression, but almost a whimper of desperation. She took another step forward, but her posture had changed completely. The massive bear moved to the edge of the mud pool, her eyes now shifting between John and her trapped cub. The aggression in her stance melted away, replaced by something that looked remarkably like concern. John remained frozen, his mind struggling to process this unprecedented behavior. Mother bears never showed vulnerability, especially not around humans. Then she did something that would haunt John's dreams for years to come. The mother bear began pushing fallen branches toward him with her nose. Her movements were deliberate, almost gentle. She was offering him tools to help with the rescue. John watched in disbelief as she continued gathering more branches, creating a crude but useful path toward her cub. Understanding dawned on John like the morning sun breaking through clouds. The mother bear wasn't just allowing him to help, she was actively participating in the rescue. With trembling hands, he began placing the branches she had gathered, creating a more stable platform in the mud. The bear watched intently, her eyes showing an intelligence that challenged everything he had been taught. As John worked to secure the branch pathway, the mother bear began moving carefully around the mud pool's edge. She positioned herself on the opposite side of her cub, and in an extraordinary display of trust, began to dig at the mud from her position. Her powerful paws created channels in the muck, helping to loosen the suction that held her cub trapped. Working together, man and bear began a rescue that would seem impossible to anyone who hadn't witnessed it. John used the branches to distribute his weight as he inched closer to the cub. The mother bear continued her digging, her efforts synchronized with his movements. The cub, sensing the change in its mother's behavior, became calmer, its fear replaced by exhausted hope. The morning sun climbed higher as this remarkable partnership continued. John managed to loop his rescue rope around the cub's body, while the mother bear's digging created the space needed to break the mud's hold. Their breath mingled in the cool air, predator and human working in an unprecedented cooperation that defied natural order. When the cub finally began to slip free, the mother bear did something even more astonishing. Instead of rushing in to claim her baby, she waited, watching as John carefully guided the rope to ensure her cub wouldn't sink again. Her patience seemed almost human, her trust in this moment absolute. The forest around them fell silent, as if nature itself held its breath at this impossible scene. With one final pull, the cub broke free from the mud's grasp. John guided it carefully along the branch pathway toward solid ground, toward its waiting mother. The young bear stumbled, weak from its ordeal, but alive. Instead of rushing away with her cub, the mother bear remained, watching as John secured the rescue rope and began his own careful retreat from the mud. In a moment that would challenge scientific understanding, the mother bear gently nudged her mud-covered cub toward a small stream nearby. As John watched from his now safe position, she began to clean her cub with slow, careful movements. But she kept glancing back at him, maintaining a connection that transcended natural boundaries. The most extraordinary part came next. Once her cub was cleaner and had taken a few drinks from the stream, the mother bear did something that would make this story seem like fiction to anyone who hadn't witnessed it. She approached John, still maintaining a respectful distance, and lowered her head in what could only be described as a gesture of gratitude. Her eyes met his, holding a depth of intelligence and emotion that would forever change his understanding of these magnificent creatures. The morning's events had transcended the normal boundaries between man and nature. In this remote corner of the wilderness, a mother bear had not only allowed human intervention, but had actively participated in saving her cub. The trust she displayed challenged every instinct of her species, every natural law of the wild. The most extraordinary part came next. Once her cub was cleaner and had taken a few drinks from the stream, the mother bear did something that would make this story seem like fiction to anyone who hadn't witnessed it. She approached John, still maintaining a respectful distance, and lowered her head in what could only be described as a gesture of gratitude. Her eyes met his, holding a depth of intelligence and emotion that would forever change his understanding of these magnificent creatures. The mother bear then did something even more remarkable. She gathered several berries from a nearby bush in her mouth and placed them on a flat rock near John. It was a clear offering, a gesture so far removed from normal bear behavior that John had to blink several times to ensure he wasn't hallucinating from the morning's stress. The cub, now recovering its strength, watched this interaction with curious eyes. Instead of showing fear of John, it mimicked its mother's calm behavior. The young bear even took a few tentative steps toward him before its mother gently guided it back with a soft grunt. The level of communication and understanding between the bears appeared almost human. Time seemed to stand still in this moment of extraordinary connection. The morning sunlight filtered through the trees, illuminating the scene like a painting. The mother bear's fur glistened with water droplets from the stream, her powerful form now relaxed and unthreatening. She continued to make soft, rumbling sounds that seemed to carry meaning beyond human understanding. For nearly an hour, the bears remained nearby. The mother bear alternated between tending to her cub and acknowledging John's presence with gentle glances. She appeared to be showing her cub that humans weren't always a threat, a behavior that contradicted everything known about wild bear interactions. The young bear, following its mother's example, began showing curiosity rather than fear. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the mother bear gathered her cub with a gentle nudge. Before leaving, she performed one final act that would remain etched in John's memory forever. She stood at the edge of the clearing, rose briefly on her hind legs, and pressed her paw print into the soft earth. It was as if she was leading a deliberate mark, a signature to commemorate this extraordinary encounter. The morning's events had transcended the normal boundaries between man and nature. In this remote corner of the wilderness, a mother bear had not only allowed human intervention, but had actively participated in saving her cub. The trust she displayed challenged every instinct of her species, every natural law of the wild. This moment would redefine everything John thought he knew about these magnificent creatures and their capacity for understanding and cooperation. The events of that spring morning marked the beginning of something unprecedented in the history of Carlton Forest. 3 days after the rescue, as John sat on his cabin porch completing his daily reports, a familiar shape emerged from the tree line. The mother bear approached his cabin, carrying berries in her mouth. With careful movements, she placed them near his steps and retreated to a respectful distance. This extraordinary offering became a regular occurrence. Each week, the mother bear would visit John's cabin, sometimes bringing berries, other times fresh fish from the stream. Her cub, growing stronger by the day, would watch from a safe distance, gradually showing more curiosity than fear. The mud-covered youngster he had rescued was transforming into a playful, healthy bear cub. Word of this remarkable relationship spread through the ranger community. At first, John's fellow rangers were skeptical, even concerned for his safety, but as more witnessed these peaceful visits, their doubt turned to amazement. Senior rangers with decades of experience had never seen anything like it. The mother bear's behavior defied everything known about wild bear interactions. John began documenting these visits with his camera. The photographs captured moments that seemed impossible. The mother bear sitting calmly while John worked on his porch. The cub playing with pine cones just yards from where he stood. Each image told a story of trust that challenged scientific understanding of wild animal behavior. Local wildlife researchers became interested in this unique relationship. They set up observation posts near John's cabin, studying the bear's behavior patterns. The mother bear's actions suggested a level of intelligence an emotional capacity that went beyond instinct. She appeared to remember the kindness shown to her cub and was deliberately maintaining a connection with the human who had helped them. As spring turned to summer, the visits continued. The mother bear would announce her presence with soft grunts, waiting at the forest's edge until John acknowledged her. She never approached while other humans were present, showing remarkable discretion. Her cub grew more confident, sometimes venturing closer to the cabin than its mother, displaying a trust that seemed to have been passed down. The local community's response evolved from initial fear to fascination. School groups would visit the ranger station, hoping to hear John tell the story of the rescue and its remarkable aftermath. He used these opportunities to teach about wildlife conservation and the importance of respecting wild animals. The story of the grateful mother bear became a powerful tool for environmental education. Other changes occurred in the forest management practices. The area where the cub had been trapped was thoroughly surveyed, and similar mud hazards were marked and monitored. The incident led to new protocols for dealing with trapped wildlife, though no one expected another rescue quite like John's. His experience provided valuable insights into bear behavior that challenged traditional wildlife management approaches. Throughout that summer, John maintained detailed records of every visit, every interaction. The mother bear's behavior showed consistent patterns. She would appear most often in the early morning or late evening, times when the forest was quietest. Her visits seemed purposeful, almost planned, as if she was maintaining a friendship she valued. The cub grew rapidly, its dark fur now glossy and thick, no trace remaining of the mud that had nearly claimed its life. It developed a distinctive white patch on its chest, making it easily identifiable. Local rangers affectionately named it Lucky, though John preferred to let both bears remain nameless, respecting their wild nature despite their unusual behavior. As autumn approached, the visits became less frequent. The bears needed to prepare for winter, focusing on finding food for hibernation. John knew this was nature's way, yet he felt a bittersweet sadness watching them appear less often. The last visit came on a crisp October morning. The mother bear and her now healthy cub stood at the forest's edge longer than usual, as if saying goodbye before their winter sleep. This extraordinary chapter in John's life changed more than just his understanding of bears. It showed him that the line between wild and tame, between animal instinct and conscious gratitude, was less clear than anyone had imagined. The mother bear's actions suggested depths of emotion and intelligence that would be studied and discussed for years to come. For more incredible stories of extraordinary wildlife encounters, subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on social media. Never miss another amazing tale of unexpected animal behavior and remarkable human-wildlife connections by hitting the notification bell. Together, let's explore the wonders of nature,